I never imagined I'd find myself in this predicament. Yet here I am, seated in front of my laptop with my fingers quivering over the keys, preparing to unravel the chaos my life has spiraled into. It all kicked off a few months back when my wife, Sophie, began to change in ways I couldn't ignore. Initially, her shifts were subtle, just minor alterations that gnawed at my thoughts like a persistent hum of unease. At 30, Sophie was a thriving lawyer, and I had always admired her drive. But suddenly, she started clocking in late more often than I could count. It felt like the office was her second home, and she frequently returned after I'd already settled into bed. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with questions. Was she genuinely swamped with cases, or was something more sinister at play? Then came her newfound fixation with the gym. I distinctly remember when we first got hitched, Sophie would scoff at the idea of working out. But recently, she seemed to practically live at the gym. It felt like every time I turned around, she was either gearing up for a workout or coming home with that post-exercise glow, sweaty and exhilarated, as if she'd just scaled a mountain. I wanted to be the supportive husband, to cheer her on, but every time she dashed out in those tight yoga pants that left little to the imagination, a knot of unease formed in my stomach. And then there was her phone. An unsettling feeling settled over me. Something felt off. She'd be glued to it, scrolling or texting, her face illuminated in the dim light of our bedroom. Whenever I tried to peek over her shoulder, she would swiftly shift it out of sight, flashing me a smile that felt more like a facade than genuine affection. I also began to notice odd charges on her bank statements, suspicious transactions that raised serious red flags, visits to places I'd never heard of before, and they certainly weren't cheap. One evening, after she had once again left for another late night at the office, I decided to take control of the situation. I met up with my buddy Lucas at our regular bar, drowning my anxieties in a few stiff drinks. He also worked in IT and had been through a rough time with his own wife, who had betrayed him. As we swapped war stories, I couldn't resist sharing my concerns about Sophie. Lucas listened closely, his expression grave as I laid out my suspicions. "Man, you have to trust your instincts," he advised, his voice low. I ignored mine, and it cost me everything. "If you think something's off, it likely is. You need to get to the bottom of this before it's too late." That's when the realization struck me. I needed proof. I returned home that night with my mind racing. After a few days of anxiety-fueled brainstorming, I made a decision. I installed an app on Sophie's phone that allowed me to track her location and read her messages. I felt like a total jerk for invading her privacy like this, but desperation has a way of clouding your judgment. What I uncovered rocked me to my core. She was secretly involved in the adult film industry. At first, I couldn't wrap my head around it. The app showed her whereabouts, and there it was. She had been visiting a sketchy production studio. Initially, she held a managerial role, but it soon became clear that she was performing in adult films. My world felt like it was shattering. I tracked her movements, like a hunter stalking prey, and discovered she frequently met with Ryan, the director. Every time I saw his name pop up on the app, a surge of rage ignited within me. What on earth was she doing with him? The internal battle was agonizing. Should I confront her? Do I live with this painful knowledge and pretend everything's fine? Or do I end this relationship right away? I felt ensnared in my own life, immobilized by uncertainty and betrayal. Sophie eventually sensed that something was amiss. She pressed me for answers, insisting it was merely work and that she had no feelings for the other men involved. Her reassurances felt empty to me, like a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. "Nathan, you're being ridiculous," she said one night after I caught her slipping out of the house for a so-called meeting. "It's just business. I promise, it's not what you think." I snapped back, my anger boiling over. "Not what I think. You're lying to my face, Soph. You're in adult films. How can you even say that to me?" She rolled her eyes, clearly exasperated. "You're being dramatic. It's just a job. I'm doing it for the money." "Money? Is that really what this is about? You didn't even have any passion for acting before this." Our arguments grew more frequent and heated. It felt like we were trapped in a relentless cycle of accusations and half-truths. The walls began closing in on me as the woman I once loved transformed into a stranger, someone I no longer recognized. As the nights dragged on, filled with tension and deceit, I understood that this was just the start of a battle I never wanted, but was now forced to confront. Weeks passed as I gathered evidence, my heart racing as I readied myself to confront Sophie. Each new piece of information only deepened the pit of anxiety in my stomach. I was done playing the fool. It was time to face her and lay everything bare. The truth felt suffocating, and I couldn't allow it to fester in the shadows any longer. The confrontation unfolded on a Tuesday evening. I waited until she got home, her smile hitting me like a punch in the gut. She had no clue what I knew, and that made me even angrier. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for what was coming. "Sophie, we need to talk," I said, my voice quivering slightly. "Is this about the late nights again?" "I told you it's work," she snapped, already on the defensive. "No, it's not just that. It's about your work in adult films," I blurted out, unable to keep it bottled up any longer. Her complexion faded, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I had rendered her speechless. But then she regained her composure and shrugged it off, a defiant smirk crossing her face. "So what? It's just a job, Nathan." My blood simmered with rage. "Just a job? You're performing in adult films, Sophie. How can you even say that with a straight face?" Crossing her arms, she adopted an icy demeanor. "I started this for financial independence. You know how stagnant our lives have become. I'm tired of the monotony in our marriage." "Monotony?" My heart raced as her words sunk in, each syllable a dagger. "So, this is your idea of escape? Getting intimate with other men in front of cameras?" "It's not like that. I don't have feelings for them. It's just acting," she retorted, her voice rising in pitch as desperation seeped through. But I couldn't accept her flimsy excuses. I was exhausted from her attempts to twist this into something that absolved her of blame. "You think I care about your so-called feelings? This isn't about that. You're seeking attention and thrills because you find our relationship dull. Instead of trying to fix things, you're running away." Her expression hardened, and for a moment, I thought she might actually grasp the severity of the situation. Instead, she shot back. "You have no idea what it's like to be me. I'm working to reclaim my independence. Maybe if you were more exciting, I wouldn't have to seek fulfillment elsewhere." I felt as though I had been slapped. "Exciting? You think hopping into bed with other men is excitement? You're completely losing touch with reality, Sophie. This isn't who you are." After a brutal argument that left us both reeling, she stormed off, declaring that she needed space to think. I paced our apartment, anger morphing into a heavy despair. I couldn't believe this was happening to us. A few days later, I discovered she was slated to star in a new film, treating it like any mundane job, as if she were just another barista or retail worker. When I confronted her about it, she nonchalantly mentioned demanding one of the actresses be replaced because she didn't want to work with certain people. "What do you mean by certain people?" I pressed, incredulous. "Just people I don't vibe with, okay?" "It's my choice," she shot back, irritation creeping into her voice. That was the moment I lost it. "You're telling me you're acting in adult films while being choosy about your co-stars? How does that even compute?" But she brushed me aside, clearly irritated, and I could feel us sliding down a dark, treacherous path. That night, I met Lucas at our usual bar, desperate to vent and sort out my next move. He listened patiently as I poured my heart out, drowning my frustrations in drink after drink. The burden of my emotions felt unbearable. "So, she's really going through with this?" Lucas asked, his eyebrows arching in disbelief. "Yeah, and she thinks it's perfectly acceptable. She claims it's for her independence and insists it's no big deal." I replied, frustration pouring from my words. Lucas shook his head disapprovingly. "Man, that's a disaster waiting to unfold. She's not just toying with fire. She's diving headfirst into a raging inferno." "Tell me about it," I muttered, running a hand through my hair. "I just don't know what to do. I love her, but this is beyond messed up." He took a thoughtful sip of his drink. "You know, maybe you should consider acting too, to really grasp what she's experiencing." I chuckled half-heartedly. "You're joking, right?" Yet, as the idea lingered in my mind, a dark part of me found it strangely alluring. What if I could immerse myself in her world? What if I could show her that I could play her game as well? Seriously, think about it. If she's doing it, why not take a step back and flip the script? Show her what it's like to be on the other side, Lucas encouraged, leaning closer. The thought simmered in my mind, refusing to leave. Perhaps there was merit to what Lucas was saying. It was twisted, but so was everything Sophie had done. As I left the bar that night, my mind spun in circles. I couldn't shake the feeling that I stood on the brink of a decision that could either unravel everything or restore some control in my life. I wasn't ready to give up on us, but I had to confront this darkness directly. I just hoped I could endure whatever came next. After a night devoid of sleep, weighed down by heavy thoughts, I resolved that I had to witness it for myself. I couldn't let this idea linger without fully grasping what my wife was truly involved in. So, I made the decision to visit the film set where Sophie was filming her latest adult movie. I wanted to see the reality of her world for myself, even if it tore me apart inside. Upon arriving at the studio, my heart raced and my palms were slick with sweat. As I stepped inside, I was engulfed by a whirlwind of sounds and smells that felt both foreign and unsettling. Laughter, chatter, and the overpowering scent of sweat mingled with cheap cologne filled the air. The atmosphere crackled with energy, yet I felt like a ghost, lurking in the shadows and observing my wife from a distance. Sophie was in the midst of a scene, and I fought to keep my emotions in check as I watched her. The way she moved, the way she laughed, it was too much to bear. My anger morphed into something darker, a fierce desire for revenge. How could she feel so comfortable in this world? Did she genuinely believe it was all just acting? The idea of her sharing herself with other men, even under the guise of work, twisted my stomach into knots. As I stood there, Lucas's words about turning the tables echoed in my mind. What if I threw myself into this madness? I could demonstrate that I wasn't just a bystander in our lives. I could immerse myself in her world, just as she had made the choice to dive into this one. That thought ignited a reckless determination within me. I searched for Simon, the producer overseeing the shoot. He exuded a magnetic charisma, with a swagger that set my teeth on edge. When he spotted me, a broad grin broke out on his face. "What brings you here? Interested in joining the fun?" Before I could fully process my thoughts, I found myself signing a contract to appear in a scene. A mix of exhilaration and dread surged through my veins as I realized I was about to cross a line I never thought I would. The following days were filled with mental preparation. I rehearsed lines and tried to convince myself that this was merely a strategy to gain leverage over Sophie. I needed to show her I was willing to step into her reality. When the day of the shoot finally arrived, nerves churned in my stomach. I arrived early, feigning casualness as I roamed the set. I caught sight of Sophie in her element, her confidence shining through as she mingled with the crew. I wanted to feel a sense of pride for her, but all I could muster was a tide of resentment. Then it happened. As the crew set up for the next scene, I saw her lock eyes with me. Her expression shifted from shock to confusion, and then flared with anger. I could almost see the gears in her mind turning as she processed my presence. I savored the moment, relishing the fact that I had now inserted myself into the process she had so willingly embraced. "Nathan, what the hell are you doing here?" she exclaimed, striding toward me, her eyes wide in disbelief. "Just trying to get a grasp on what you do, Sophie," I replied, a smirk creeping across my lips. Thought I'd get a taste of the action myself. Her jaw dropped, and I could see panic flicker in her eyes. "You can't be serious. You're not actually going to do this." "Why not? You seem to be having a blast." I shot back, my confidence swelling. "Maybe I want to show you that I can fit into this world too." "You're making a colossal mistake, Nathan," she hissed, her voice low but seething with fury. "This isn't a game." "Oh, I think it is," I replied, my voice icy and unyielding. "You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." The tension between us crackled in the air, electric and palpable. I could see her struggle to maintain her composure, but inside, I felt a sense of triumph. I was reclaiming some power that she had taken from me, even if it came through this twisted decision. As preparations for the scene unfolded, my heart raced, not just from nerves, but from the thrill of knowing I was about to step into a world I never dreamed I'd enter. The actress originally cast for my role, Isabella, had refused to work alongside Sophie. Her absence had opened the door for me, and I couldn't help but relish the irony of it all. As the cameras began to roll, I felt the weight of my choices pressing down on me. I was both a participant and an observer, ensnared in a surreal whirlwind of emotions. Each moment on set brought a surge of adrenaline, mingled with anger and betrayal. The way Sophie looked at me, a blend of shock and disbelief, only fueled my determination. When the shoot wrapped, I didn't feel any physical satisfaction, but a peculiar sense of moral clarity washed over me. It was a twisted sort of victory, knowing that Sophie was now experiencing the betrayal I had endured for weeks. I had become an active player in her game, a character in her story, and at that moment, I realized there was no turning back. The drive home was steeped in an eerie silence, punctuated only by the hum of the engine. My mind swirled with conflicting emotions, each vying for control. I had crossed a threshold that felt irreparable. While I didn't derive any physical pleasure from the experience, I felt an odd sense of moral relief. In a distorted way, I had leveled the playing field. Sophie was now acutely aware of the depth of my betrayal, and that hollow victory left me feeling emptier than before. Upon entering our apartment, the tension was thick enough to slice. I could sense the storm brewing within her, ready to erupt. "You think this was some kind of game, don't you?" she spat, venom dripping from her voice. "You really think you could just waltz in and act like it's no big deal?" I turned to face her, fury boiling over. "You don't get to act surprised. You put us in this situation, Sophie. You created this mess." "What mess?" "I was doing what I needed for myself," she retorted, her hands clenching into tight fists. "You're right. You needed to find yourself by sleeping with other men and parading around like some kind of star. That's a real solution." I shot back, sarcasm lacing my words. The argument escalated, voices rising, accusations flying like daggers. I felt an overwhelming sense of inevitability wash over me. This was it. We were at the end of the road. The woman I had loved, the one I thought I knew, had been replaced by a stranger who had shattered our vows and turned our lives into a farce. In that chaotic moment, I made a resolute decision. "I'm filing for divorce," I declared, the words spilling from my lips like a weight being lifted, both liberating and terrifying. Sophie's expression shifted from shock to fury. "You can't be serious. After everything we've been through? After everything you've done, you mean? This isn't about us anymore. It's about your choices," I said, each word heavy with finality. She attempted to pull me back into her web of manipulation, leaning heavily on the shared memories of our past. "Nathan, we had something truly special. Don't you remember? You're throwing it all away." Her voice trembled with nostalgia, but all I felt was a cold resolve. "Those memories don't mean a damn thing when they're overshadowed by your actions. You chose this path, and now you have to face the fallout," I replied firmly. The weeks that followed were a chaotic blur of legal meetings and emotional upheavals, a storm cloud of decisions hanging over my head. Emily, my lawyer, emerged as my lifeline amid the turmoil. "Stay strong, Nathan. Don't let her guilt trap you. Focus on your future," she advised, her tone unwavering and reassuring. But Sophie was unyielding. The divorce quickly morphed into a battleground. She resisted any discussions about dividing our assets, clinging to everything as if it were a lifeline. I could see the desperation in her eyes, the fear of losing not only our home, but the life she had built. "You're being unreasonable," she would shout, her voice oscillating between rage and sadness. "We can still work this out." A surge of emotion coursed through me, something I had never fully expressed before. "You don't get to manipulate me any longer, Sophie. I'm not the same person you can walk over. I deserve so much more than this." But each confrontation left me feeling increasingly hollow and drained. The pain was suffocating, as if I were witnessing the final pieces of my marriage dissolve right in front of me. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I discovered that Sophie had already moved on. The revelation hit me like a gut punch. She was seeing someone new, a guy named Jordan. A quick online search confirmed that their relationship had begun long before our official separation, and it felt like rubbing salt into an open wound. My heart sank as I realized she hadn't just betrayed our marriage. She had emotionally checked out long before I had confronted her. The news rocked me to my core. When she finally admitted it, I found my voice quaking with anger. "I can't believe you'd stoop so low." "I deserve to be happy too, Nathan," she replied, her tone sharp and defensive. "I'm not going to sit here and wait for you to figure out what you want." "Happy? You think jumping into another relationship will bring you happiness? This mess is of your making, Sophie. I'm just dealing with the wreckage." I shot back, frustration boiling over. Every interaction only fueled my determination to push forward with the divorce. I was no longer just reacting to her decisions. I was seizing control of my life. With Emily's guidance, I steeled myself for the arduous journey ahead. Every day brought new challenges and emotional hurdles. Yet deep down, I knew this was the only way forward. I had to release the past, even though it felt like tearing off a scab. As I surveyed the life we had built together, now reduced to ruins, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. I would rise from the ashes of this marriage, no matter how long it took. The days stretched into weeks after the divorce, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I could finally breathe. Closing that chapter of my life felt surreal, yet the shadow of it still lingered. I needed to prioritize myself, my healing, my rebuilding. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to reclaim my life. I committed to focusing on my physical and mental well-being. I joined a gym, not the one where Sophie flaunted her new identity, but a local spot where I could sweat out my frustrations without constant reminders of what I had lost. Each workout became a therapeutic release, enabling me to channel my anger and pain into something constructive. I also started seeing Larry, a therapist who specialized in relationship trauma. The first time I walked into his office, it felt like stepping into unknown territory. "So, Nathan, what brings you here?" he asked, his voice calm and inviting. "I just got out of a messy divorce, and I need help figuring out how to move forward," I replied, my voice barely rising above a whisper. "Let's unpack that," he suggested, and for the next hour, I poured out the chaos that had engulfed my life. Talking to Larry became a lifeline, a safe space to vent my frustrations and fears. Slowly, I began to regain my confidence, rediscovering who I was beyond the wreckage of my marriage. In the weeks following the divorce, I found myself yearning for connection, yet I wasn't quite ready to plunge into another relationship. I didn't want to rush into anything, afraid of repeating the same mistakes. That's when Lucas stepped up, ever the supportive friend. One evening, over drinks, he casually mentioned a woman he thought might pique my interest. "Her name is Ava," he said, leaning back in his chair, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "She's been through a rough breakup too. I think you two could really hit it off." "Maybe, but I'm not looking for anything serious right now," I replied cautiously. "I don't want to rush into a rebound. Just meet her. What's the worst that could happen?" Lucas nudged me playfully, his enthusiasm infectious. After some back and forth, I reluctantly agreed to have coffee with Ava. Our first meeting was casual, just a simple chat over lattes at a charming little cafe downtown. I was unexpectedly struck by how easy it was to connect with her. She radiated warmth and had an inviting kindness that drew me in. As we swapped stories about our lives, it became clear that we had both faced heartbreak, albeit through different experiences. "I used to think I had everything sorted out," she shared, her eyes filled with a knowing depth. "But then my world fell apart, and I realized the importance of truly understanding myself before I could be with someone else." Her insight resonated with me. It was refreshing to converse with someone who understood the intricate nature of love and loss without any judgment. We exchanged numbers and agreed to keep in touch, but I made it clear that I wasn't looking for anything serious. Meanwhile, Sophie began making attempts to reconnect. The first message was a jolt to my system. "Nathan, I've been reflecting on us. I know I messed up, and I'd really like to talk," it read. Anger, and confusion surged within me. How could she even think I'd want to have a conversation after everything that had transpired? I chose silence, resolute in my decision not to fall back into her manipulative clutches. Days stretched into weeks, and her messages continued to arrive, each one growing increasingly desperate. "I miss you," she texted. "Can we at least meet for coffee?" Each time, I ignored her pleas. I was determined to move on, unwilling to let her back into my life. I had to protect the fragile stability I was finally beginning to cultivate. In therapy, Larry reinforced my determination. "You're making the right choice, Nathan. Establishing boundaries is crucial. This is your time to heal, and allowing her back in could jeopardize that," he advised. As I focused on my own healing, I felt the layers of pain gradually peel away. I took up jogging in the mornings, explored new recipes, and even dusted off an old passion, painting. I lost myself in vibrant colors and brushstrokes, finding solace in creating beauty from the chaos that had consumed my life. As time passed, I began to open up to Ava. We started meeting regularly, sharing laughter and lighthearted stories. It felt invigorating to connect with someone who wasn't tied to my past, someone who didn't carry the weight of my former heartache. Each meeting brought a glimmer of hope, reminding me that life could still be filled with joy. Yet, despite my enjoyment of Ava's company, I remained cautious. I wasn't ready to dive headfirst into a serious relationship. I wanted to ensure I had healed completely before allowing anyone else into my heart. As the weeks rolled on, I came to realize that recovery wasn't merely about moving on. It was about rediscovering self-love and finding joy in life's simple pleasures. I was reclaiming my existence, day by day, and even though the road was long, I felt more prepared to face whatever lay ahead. As the months progressed following the divorce, I began to notice a shift within myself. Each day felt like a step further away from the chaos of my past and toward a more promising future. I was committed to reclaiming my life, and that conviction was exhilarating. I devoted my energy to my physical and mental well-being. I joined a local gym, not the trendy one where Sophie flaunted her new persona, but a straightforward, no-frills place where I could release my frustrations without memories of her clouding my mind. The first few workouts were brutal. My body protested after months of neglect. However, as the weeks passed, I found my groove. Each session became a form of therapy, allowing me to channel my pent-up anger and disappointment into something constructive. In conjunction with my physical journey, I continued seeing Larry, the therapist who specialized in relationship trauma. Our sessions proved to be eye-opening. "So, Nathan, what brings you here?" he inquired during our initial meeting, his voice steady and inviting. As I recounted the chaos of my marriage, the betrayal, and my struggle to move forward, I felt a wave of vulnerability wash over me. With each session, the burden of my past began to lift. Larry encouraged me to embrace my emotions, anger, sadness, confusion, and to view them as building blocks rather than barriers. I began to understand that I was more than just my pain. I was a survivor, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. With newfound clarity, I took a bold step and launched my own business, a dream that had been sidelined during my marriage. The thrill of building something from scratch reignited my passion. Late nights spent drafting business plans and designing my website invigorated me like nothing else. When launch day finally arrived, it felt surreal. I surveyed the small space I had rented, filled with friends, family, and colleagues who had supported me through my darkest moments. Each cheer and smile was a powerful reminder that I was not alone. I had forged a new path, and the atmosphere in the room buzzed with excitement. Amidst this transformation, Lucas remained a vital part of my journey, always encouraging me to step outside my comfort zone. One evening, over drinks at our usual bar, he casually mentioned a woman he thought I might hit it off with. "Her name is Ava," he said, leaning closer with a glint of mischief in his eyes. "She's been through a tough breakup too, but I really think you two could connect." Initially hesitant, I replied, "I'm not looking for anything serious right now, Lucas. I just got out of a marriage, and I don't want to rush into another relationship. Just meet her." What's the worst that could happen? Lucas pressed, giving me a playful nudge. After a bit of persuasion, I finally agreed to grab coffee with Ava. Our first encounter was laid back, set in a charming cafe that filled the air with the enticing aroma of freshly baked pastries. To my surprise, the conversation flowed easily between us. She had an infectious laugh and a genuine warmth that instantly put me at ease. As we shared stories about our lives, it became clear that we were both navigating the wreckage of our past relationships. I used to believe I had everything figured out, Ava confessed, her eyes reflecting a depth of understanding. But then my whole world fell apart, and I realized how crucial it is to really know yourself before getting involved with someone else. Her words struck a chord deep within me. It felt refreshing to connect with someone who understood the intricacies of love and heartache without casting judgment. We exchanged numbers, and for the first time in a while, a flicker of hope sparked within me. Perhaps there was still a chance for me to find something genuine and real. As our meetings continued, our connection blossomed. We discovered common interests in art, travel, and cooking. One weekend, we decided on a spontaneous trip to the coast. The wind whipped through our hair as we strolled along the sandy beach, our laughter mingling with the rhythmic sound of crashing waves. In those moments, I felt lighter, as if the burden of my past was finally beginning to lift. Each experience with her helped me release the pain I had carried for far too long. Just when I thought I had completely moved on, Sophie unexpectedly resurfaced in my life. One afternoon, a text from her rattled me. "Nathan, I've been thinking a lot about us. I know I messed up, and I'd really like to talk," it read. A wave of anger and confusion washed over me. Did she honestly think I'd be willing to open the door and welcome her back after everything that had happened? When we finally met, I was struck by the change in her demeanor, perhaps more vulnerable, but that didn't soften the anger simmering inside me. "I've had time to reflect," she began, her voice quivering slightly. "I made mistakes, and I want to make things right." "Make things right? You can't just stroll back into my life after everything you've done and expect forgiveness." I snapped, my words charged with the hurt of years. "You chose this path. It's time you take responsibility for it." She attempted to twist my words, evoking memories of happier times we had shared, but I stood firm. "Those memories don't change the reality of your actions. I can't go back to that life. I refuse to be part of your past anymore." As she walked away, her shoulders slumped in defeat, I felt a bittersweet relief wash over me. I was no longer the man willing to accept empty apologies or shoulder the blame for someone else's choices. I was moving forward, finally breaking free from the chains of that toxic relationship. With each passing day, the past faded further into the background. I was crafting a new identity, built on self-respect and determination. I poured my energy into my work and nurtured my budding relationship with Ava, who inspired me to embrace life wholeheartedly. We began planning weekend getaways, exploring art galleries, and trying out new restaurants. One Saturday, we spent the day painting in a local studio, each of us lost in our creative flow. It was an invigorating experience. I had finally shed the burdens that had weighed me down for so long. As summer melted into fall, I hosted a launch party for my business, inviting friends, family, and colleagues to celebrate this new chapter in my life. Standing in that room, surrounded by the joyful sounds of laughter and cheers, I felt a profound sense of belonging and accomplishment that I had missed for far too long. Ava stood by my side, her radiant smile lighting up the space. As we danced together, it dawned on me that I had finally shed the chains of my past. I was not merely surviving, I was truly thriving. The memories of what had once been no longer haunted me. Instead, they served as powerful reminders of my resilience. Stepping outside for a moment, I took a deep breath of the crisp evening air, feeling ready to face whatever lay ahead. The stars twinkled brightly above me, a stunning reminder of the vast possibilities that awaited. I was committed to embracing every moment and constructing a life that reflected the person I had become. This was my new beginning, and I felt more than prepared to seize it.